it's Riley, and it's day 46 of recovery from phalloplasty. So I do want to talk about a specific topic for here all today. So the topic is actually going to be around my complications and exactly how many I've had with surgery, and actually giving you a full rundown of everything I've dealt with thus far. I have done topics on this as I've been trying to keep you all up to date as things progress and as things change, but I kind of just want to do a full rundown for anybody who maybe missed some of that or just wants to maybe come to this video and know about all of my complications thus far. So I do want to say this is a warning for anybody who's maybe squeamish around certain like wounds or topics of wounds and stuff like that. So please take yourself off of this video if you're a bit squeamish, but otherwise I'm just going to get right into it. I do have some notes here that I'm going to be reading off of, so I do apologize in advance, but I'll be looking back and forth between the camera and my notes here. So to start off, I will start with my arm, and the first thing I noticed about 7 days post-op was I had a hematoma, and it was right about here, and they didn't really seem too concerned about it, so they didn't really do anything. They didn't drain it. They said it would just drain itself, which I wasn't too concerned on. I've had hematomas before, and I mentioned that in previous videos. Now, eventually, though, that hematoma did end up bursting, and it actually ended up pooling underneath the skin. Now, because of that, the skin actually started to fail in those areas, because what happened was actually it became too soft and too wet with the blood pooling underneath. So now, eventually, what happened was that skin actually ended up splitting in the area of the hematoma, and therefore the skin actually didn't take and ended up just basically like no longer had any skin in that area. So now, because of that though, what happened is eschar ended up forming in those areas, and in case you don't know what it is a very thick like scab, except for it is quite a bit thicker, quite a bit darker, doesn't quite feel like the exact same as a scab. So that formed all in the area where the tissue did not take. Now, it did take a while for that to kind of really like do anything. It stayed like eschar probably for about a week, 2 weeks, probably maybe even a little bit longer, but eventually it did start to soften up, and actually I noticed that there was skin underneath it, but it did not look like regular skin as it was healing. It looked like something else, and what happened was that eschar and underneath it started to form into granulation tissue and also hypergranulation tissue, which is basically tissue that ended up coming up higher than my actual tissue that was actually healing. So it ended up looking like bumps and stuff all over my skin, which is sometimes what does happen as things start to heal, but the hypergranulation tissue is what was the concern here. So eventually though, we started treating that and started doing silver nitrate treatments, and then it started going down. So the other thing though was that on the back side here, I also did have a complication, which was a exposed tendon, and that's down here, which was covered by a scab, but eventually just that one area I guess didn't really take, and so it lifted, and then the tendon was then exposed. So then from there, the eschar did all fall off from this side, and we've been able to treat it like I mentioned. And same thing with on this side. So all the tissue that was covered by scabbing or eschar is pretty much, I would say, over 90% now gone, which is really good, and I'm very happy with that. And I've pretty much been able to treat it ever since. So that's been the major majority of like this and with my arm. Now the other concerns that we've had are down here with the zigzag stitch, or it was supposed to be the zigzag stitch. Now, what happened was about 7 days post-op, when they took off my arm like cast, is that they also took off everything that was covering it, and there was a piece of tape that was supposed to stay on this zigzag stitch, kind of like similar to when I had my top surgery. It's supposed to stay on there to help things heal, and that way your incision fully heals closed, and then eventually that tape would fall off. Well, they ended up ripping that tape, and what happened when they did that is it ripped some skin, also ended up causing some separation between the stitching though as well. So one, the zigzag stitch split. Two, ended up becoming covered in eschar as well, same as what happened on this side of my arm here. So that did end up getting covered with that. And also I've noticed that there is a bit of hypergranulation tissue also developed in that area, and is actually currently still healing. So I've dealt with quite a bit of issues and complications on my arm. To be exact, total amount of complications has been 12. So 12 complications with my arm like alone, and like I said, there's still parts of it that are healing. So the tendon is still healing, a bit of the granulation tissue on the back is still healing, granulation tissue on this part is still healing, and the zigzag stitch is still healing, and I'm over a month and a half post-op now. So it is going to be quite a bit of a journey because of the amount of complications I've had and what the complications I've had were. So yeah, 12 complications is a lot to deal with. Honestly, I didn't expect that many, especially on the arm. I expected maybe one, if any. I really was not prepared for that. I've never really heard of a lot of people dealing with the complications I've had, especially with the arm part of it. I know there was going to be possible complications with the phallus, and that is where I expected the complications, not with this. So now to talk about the phallus actually is the first complication I had coming out of surgery. I think even it was either on my first day or my second day post-op, but we noticed pretty early on is that it looked like there was bleeding internally. So it was basically becoming red on the left side of the phallus. And in order to help this, what my surgeon did is they actually started poking it with a needle and bringing like the blood to the top of the phallus and not keeping it in, but also started using a liquid and a gel to also help pull that blood out. So they started using that on the phallus. Now, eventually though, as time went on and as we stopped using the gel, it actually started to create a scab and a scar on the phallus, the same as what happened on my arm, but in that area that it was the complication started. So eventually though, we noticed underneath and around the base of the phallus, we got some yellow tissue, which is what they call fibrin. But what we also noticed is in the same area as the fibrin, I ended up having 5 different bacterias, and one of them was a hospital bacteria. So eventually I ended up going on some antibiotics, as most of you all know. But yeah, the other thing though was eventually that the scabbing did start falling off in some of the areas, but there is still some of it that has still remained. Even though I'm over a month and a half, it's been very slow. So same as what with here, is it was a very slow process just because of the amount of complications I've had. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on is right now is as that part of that scab has been lifting, underneath some of that tissue, it also looks like the granulation tissue that is on my arm. So it's not quite healthy skin, but it at least is granulation tissue. We want to see that when scabs come off, it's either we want healthy tissue or we want granulation tissue, because eventually, as long as we can treat it and we do use the right products, it will turn into healthy tissue, which I'm happy to know, but it's just going to take a lot longer to get there. So yeah, again, with all of the complications with the phallus, I've had 8, which again, like I didn't expect that many. I expected to at least have maybe 1 or 2, but definitely not that many at all. So all in all, like with complications with my arm, with the phallus and everything combined, I've had now a total of 20 complications, which, like, as I mentioned, it was not something I expected. It's not something that I thought would be, what my experience. And just something that no matter the amount of research that I did, or no matter the amount of information that I had, I was just not prepared to go through something like this and to deal with like everything that I have. But I'm taking it with strides and doing all that I can, and just dealing with one complication at a time, maybe a few actually at the same time. But all I can do is just focus on those complications, do what I can to make it better, and just know that hopefully at the end of all of this, I will get through it and, be able to come out of this recovery with everything intact. That's my biggest fear of mine, just going through all of this recovery and then losing everything that I went through. So it's just, was something I was not expecting to deal with all of that, but it's just something I want to be able to put in a video as a whole in case, people are looking into phalloplasty. This is not the usual experience. This is not something that is going to happen, but it's just something to keep in mind that this could be your experience. This could be your results. And, if this is not something that you're aware of, it at least is giving you that information, but also is something to consider when going into surgery. Hey, that if this is going to be worth it for you to experience something like I am, and to be able to go through all of that and to be able to put your body through all of that. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'm not doing this and hopefully to deter anybody from possibly going into surgery, but it's just something that I want to make people aware of. But anyways, I do appreciate y'all watching these videos. If you have any questions, topics, or ideas with this, please feel free to put it down in the comments down below. I will say, if you want to help in any way, there's going to be a link in my description. As always, it does give you access to my Amazon wish list, the recovery tip option, if you want to help in any way, but also gives you access to all my other social medias. If you want to follow me on there. Make sure like it helps you to follow me on this journey. But as well, I make sure to follow me and subscribe on here so you can stay up to date on the topics and videos on here. But anyways, thank you all for being here. Bye for now.